They toiled westward on the sun's path, and by strength and skill and valor, they rolled the unknown back before them. The continent was crossed. The Republic had reached its farthest frontier, and the thing was done.
Meet Palle Bo, a digital nomad from Denmark on an epic journey around the world. At the age of 50, he made a bold decision. He sold everything, his house, his car, his furniture, and set out with a quest to visit every single country in the world, documenting everything along the way. This is the Radio Vagabond podcast.
And be like this.
I've arrived to St. Anne in the outskirts of St. Louis, where I'm house sitting. I'm taking care of a house and 2 dogs, Remy and Sassy. I get picked up at the airport and I spend the first night with the family, Natalie and John, and their 2 wonderful kids.
Mickey Mouse!
The next day, Natalie and John are going to Mexico alone, with the kids staying with the grandparents. This episode is brought to you in part by Hotels25.com. It's a website that helps you find the best prices on hotels around the world. Hotels25.com, it's best price guaranteed. Here in St. Louis, they have a big park. It's called the Forrest Park, and it is absolutely beautiful with a big lake and a lot of free stuff. They have a museum. That's where I'm heading right now. The art museum. Right in front of the museum, they have a thing called Art Hill that takes you down to the lake. That's where I was on Friday to watch a free movie.
Stay back! Don't come any closer!
They were showing Titanic.
Just give me your hand, I'll pull you back over.
No! Stay where you are! I mean it! I'll let go!
No, you won't.
What do you mean, no, I won't?
They also have a big theater. That is not free though, but it seats I don't know how many people. Very, very big. It's outdoors, and I was there on Saturday night to see this musical called All Shook Up. It was a very big production with a huge ensemble on stage and a big orchestra. Really, really high-class musical. All Elvis music, by the way, which is a good warm-up for my trip to Graceland, Memphis, in a few days. And then they have a zoo. And it's not just any zoo. In fact, the zoo was voted the best zoo in the United States this year. They've been number 2 on this list for a few years, only being beaten by San Diego Zoo. But this year they're number 1. And I'm going there tomorrow, and I can't wait to see what kind of zoo that is and what makes it so good and unique. But right now I'm in front of the museum and I'm going to see some art. Well, that's what I thought I was going to be doing. It's closed on Mondays. I was here yesterday as well when it was Sunday, and I came just a little bit too late. They close a bit early on Saturdays and Sundays. They close at 5 o'clock, and I was there a little after 5 o'clock. And if I looked at the sign when I was standing right here yesterday trying to open the locked door, I would have seen that they are closed every Monday. Closed Mondays, Thanksgiving Day, and Christmas Day. Yeah. What do I do now?
I suddenly remembered that somebody told me that I should try a local specialty. Ted Drew's frozen custard on the historical Route 66 here in St. Louis. It's a kind of ice cream, and people line up for a small paper cup of the stuff. And it was delicious, but I honestly think that the history part of it was a big deal. This is the Radio Vagabond podcast. If you like what you hear, please leave a review in iTunes. If you're listening on an iPhone, you can actually do it right there within your podcast app. What you're hearing here is Sassy, the smallest of the two dogs that I'm taking care of here in St. Louis. Both of them are wonderful dogs, the small Sassy and the big Remy. And I was told that it was important that I was sleeping in the master bedroom in the big bed because both dogs wanted to lie in the bed with me at night, under the covers. But let's go back to my first night with these dogs. Natalie and John have just arrived to Mexico, and I was cooking some dinner for myself. When I opened the oven, a bit of smoke came out and activated the fire alarm. Or rather, the fire alarms, because there were a lot of them and they were connected. No matter what I did, I couldn't make them stop. They just kept chirping and saying fire, fire. The dogs, especially Remy, were going ballistic. This squeaking, chirping noise must have hit a frequency that was very sensible for this poor dog. So I thought, now that I can't stop the damn things, let me take the dogs for a long walk while the air cleared and those bloody alarms would stop yelling fire, fire. I was told that I could easily open the front door. These were well-behaved dogs and they would never run off. So to get them out of the noise, I opened the door, got the leash that I wanted to attach to the dogs as I got outside. I shouldn't have done that because just as the door was open, Remy bolted. In few seconds he was down the road and around the corner and out of my sight. I called him. He didn't respond. I locked the door, I got Sassy on the leash, and then I tried to catch up with him while I still was calling his name again and again. This was not a good situation on my first night here with the dogs. But I wasn't really worried. This was a quiet residential area, no fast traffic, and this good old boy, he could easily find his way back again. So I was sure everything would be fine in just a few minutes. 5 minutes later, Natalie calls me from Mexico. "Hi, Pelle. I just wanted to hear if everything is okay," she said quietly with a smile. I thought they just arrived and now they were by the side of the pool with a mojito, so they just wanted to check in to see if I needed anything. So I said, "Oh yeah, everything's fine." People who know me know that I am quite an honest guy. And no, I wasn't proud of saying something that technically wasn't 100% true, but I expected to have Remy on the leash in a few minutes, and why should I worry them now that they're down there relaxing by the pool? I considered this a little white lie. And I didn't feel like telling her that her
wonderful dog that she loves very much was not around because I activated the fire alarm. No reason to have her think he loses my dog and burns my house down on the first day of the job. This is not something that'll get me the best review on Trusted House Sitters. After a short pause, she said, "Are you sure that everything's okay?" At this point, I didn't feel like repeating my lie, so I said, Remy just ran off, but I'm catching him in a few minutes," or something like that. "He ran off?" she said, and added, "Well, actually, I know he did. Somebody who lives down the corner just called me. My phone number's on the collar. They're bringing him in a minute, so stay by their house." And in that moment, a car came towards me. And this big rascal of a dog was sitting proud on the front seat, and I even think he was smiling at me. I have no idea how I managed to explain what had happened, but actually I ended up getting a 5-star review on Trusted House Sitters. They wrote, "Palle did a great job tending to our dogs. He even stayed calm and worked through a fire alarm chirping issue where our dog was very afraid." Whew.
There are 5 seats per tram. Children are allowed to sit on laps, meaning you can exceed that 5. If you have any back problems or problem with stairs or anything, please let me know. I'll get you on a tram that requires less steps. Any questions at any time, please feel free to ask me.
Here I am at the Gateway Arch, and I'm about to take the tram to the top of this magnificent arch that is the landmark of St. Louis. I went underground, and they started the construction of this magnificent landmark in just a few months before I was born, in '64. Right now, I'm standing in line, getting ready to board the tram.
The Gateway Arch is the tallest man-made monument in the United States of America. We're 630 feet tall, 630 feet wide. We're a little higher than the Washington Monument, which stands about 555 feet. Has anyone ever been to the tallest
This beautiful silvery Gateway Arch is the tallest man-made monument in the United States. It stands 630 feet tall, that's 193 meters, and 630 feet wide, and is a little bit taller than the Washington Monument. And now I'm in a tiny tram on my way to the top.
So none of y'all have been up before? Oh man, that's an awesome view.
After admiring the view from the top, I visited the museum in the basement under the monument, and one of the things I did was watch a movie about the history behind it. Very well produced and very American.
Let the historian tell how it was. They toiled westward on the sun's path, and by strength and skill and valor, they rolled the unknown back before them. The continent was crossed. The Republic had reached its farthest frontier. Meriwether Lewis's dream had come true. And the thing was done. Here on the river where they set forth, we have raised a monument to their dream and to all those who followed on the way west.
And now we're going back to Forrest Park to visit the best zoo in the United States. Here I meet Steve.
My name is Steve Bircher. I'm curator of mammals, and I also serve as the director of the Center for Conservation of Carnivores in Africa.
Oh.
So not only do we work here at the zoo, but some of the curators also manage programs for conservation efforts in range countries outside of the zoo.
Yeah. Have you been with this zoo for a long time?
I have been here for 39 years.
Wow.
So I've grown up here at the zoo. I started here many years ago as a keeper and then worked my way up the ranks. to my present position as curator of mammals.
And how is the zoo different today than it was 39 years ago?
It has evolved. When I started here almost 40 years ago, we had a staff here that was about 1/4 of what it is now. Our budget, same, was about 1/4. We have really grown. We've increased departments here at the zoo. We have departments that we didn't have, a dedicated marketing department, public relations, human resources, those kinds of departments. So we've grown into a corporation, basically. And we have a development department, and that's been very important because it's difficult to build new exhibits like Sea Lion Sound, for instance, if you don't have fundraising efforts.
Yeah.
And that's been really positive. And so I think that you asked the question, why is our zoo special, or how it's changed? We're really fortunate here in St. Louis. We're centrally located, so in the country, we're not that difficult to get to. We have free admission.
Yeah, that's
really
one thing that I
really
feel
very
is
cool. Yeah.
Well, here I am in the heartland of the United States of America,
Right.
and free admission. It's
Free
almost
admission,
like
yeah.
socialism.
Yeah, it's really nice. Well, that's the way our zoo was set up over 100 years ago.
But that's amazing.
Now, however, I have to say that there was a mill tax that was established originally, so that people that lived in the city, at that time there was only a city, today, if you live in the St. Louis city or county, you pay a portion of your personal property tax goes to support the zoo.
Yeah.
And that now pays probably about 1/3 of our operating budget.
yeah.
So obviously we have to generate the other 2/3 here at the zoo. And we do that through our concessions, railroad, the shows, some attractions that are paid attractions. But
But still, I come from a country we pay a minimum of 50% tax, and our zoos are not free.
yes, yeah. So that's one of the things that does make us
Yeah.
unique. Now there are 2 other large zoos that are also free admission. Lincoln
Yeah,
Park in Chicago.
it's not the normal thing
It is not the
in the
normal
U.S.
thing.
now.
No, because obviously we do have to raise revenue and support ourselves. But even with the free admission, we probably have close to 50,000 members, zoo members. And the members normally, in other zoos will buy a membership so that they can have free admission to could go to the zoo whenever they like.
Yeah.
But we have free admission, and we still have people who are supporting the zoo and buying these memberships, and that then gives them opportunities to go to the parking lot and to use the railroad and some of the paid venues that we do have here. Now, I should also say that even though you may pay to park in the parking lot, that there are free periods at the zoo. We have a free day on Fridays to go to the Children's Zoo and Stingray. Every day, the first hour of the morning. So you can theoretically come to the zoo and not spend a dime. You can bring in food and drink. If you come early enough, you can park for free. You can go to these different venues. And we hope that will always remain.
Yeah. And then this year it was voted the best zoo in the United States.
That's correct. So
Was that the first time in your time here?
Well, actually, there was another survey several years ago. I'm not as familiar with the group, the Zagat group, I believe, that also selected St. Louis Zoo as a number 1 zoo.
Yeah.
So, and I guess they look at different criteria, and
That must have been a huge honor.
It is. But I think that the other reason why we're really fortunate here in St. Louis is that people in St. Louis, for as many years as I can remember, have always supported the zoo. They've been very generous to the zoo, and it's not just the corporations and businesses here in St. Louis, it's individuals. So I have a lot of colleagues that work in other zoos, and they don't always see that same support. So people in St. Louis are special. They really do love their zoo. And just like the other cultural institutions here in Forrest Park, we have the Science Center and the History Society and the Botanical Garden and some of the other art museum that are also very popular with St. Louis
And
residents.
a lot of that is also free.
That's correct.
But Steve, why do you think that you did win? What is it that makes it unique?
Well, I think it's some of the factors that we were just talking about. The fact that we are a large zoo, we have a diverse collection, we have a lot of very popular animals. We have elephants and great apes and polar bear, and we have the sea lions here. We have some really great exhibits. And some of these exhibits were here for a long time, but as we know that exhibits will become obsolete and the standards change, and we've been doing that over the last really 15 or 20 years. If you look at the new exhibits at the west end of the zoo up on what we call the river's edge for our elephants and rhinos and hippo, we have underwater viewing of hippo.
Yeah, you have a baby
hyenas.
rhino, I hear.
We have a baby rhino right now that's extremely popular. I hope you get to see this little guy. So we have some really neat exhibits here. So obviously people like that. But I think you touched on it before, the fact that we're centrally located, free admission. So those are all, I think, factors that led to that.
Even though you've been here 39 years, you weren't here for the opening.
No, we're over 100 years old. It actually became an established zoo in 1910, and the first structure here at the zoo was what was called the bird cage, the flight cage. And in 1904, the World's Fair was held here in St. Louis. And that was a structure, that was an exhibit that was built by the Smithsonian Institution. It was the largest open flight aviary in the world at that time. Now there are other aviaries that are larger than that today. But that was actually the first structure that was here in Forrest Park. And then our zoo built up some years later from that point, and all these other exhibits came online after that. So having a 100-year history, I think, helps as well.
So what are the plans for the future? Because you can't expand the size because you're restricted. So is something going out? Is something new coming in?
Well, we never stopped evolving, and we're always strategic planning. And as you said, our campus here is finite, but we are very interested in acquiring some property outside the zoo where we can build some of our breeding programs and do some things that we can't do here on this campus. Because that's very important, because we're involved in structured breeding programs today that are called species survival plans. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but that involves a group of zoos that maintain a certain size population, and then by moving those individuals, we can manage genetic and demographic goals. Well, we realize here that we can only hold a few number of each species or subspecies. But if we could acquire a larger tract of land somewhere not too far from the zoo, we could then achieve those goals. So that's something that we're very interested in. Another important part of our zoo today is you see what's going on here at this zoo, what we call our ex situ programs. We're also very interested in situ conservation, and that's obviously where animals are found in the wild. So we have what's called the Wild Care Institute here, and that consists of 12 centers that are located around the world. Myself, other curators, researchers here at the zoo manage those programs. And as I said, those are in range country areas. We're developing those programs. We're working with research colleagues in those areas, and we realize that this is just a portion of what is needed to sustain animals into the future. We know that protecting and conserving animals in the wild is just as important. So that's why we're now finding resources to put into those programs in the range countries.
I just got here. We went and saw the sea lions, but I plan to spend a long time here. What are the highlights? What are the things that I need to see now?
Well, our last strategic plan, it was called the Living Promise campaign, which ended last year. About half of that campaign consisted of new carnivore exhibits. I happen to manage all the carnivore exhibits, so I'm very proud of these exhibits. You've seen one, the Sea Lion Sound. A couple of years ago, following this exhibit, we built new exhibits for Andean bear, Malayan sun bear, African painted dogs. That's up in River's Edge. That then was followed by a new polar bear exhibit, Polar Bear Point, that opened 2 years ago. I hope you see that. And now under construction and planned to open this fall will be Grizzly Ridge. So those are some exhibits, our newest exhibits. But in addition to that, you really need to see the river's edge, which has some of the species that I mentioned earlier, the elephants, the baby rhino, the hippos, the underwater viewing of hippos. We have cheetahs, hyena, bush dog, anteater, animals up in that particular area. If you look at,
Heck, why don't I just see the whole thing?
just see the whole thing. And it's interesting because if you look at the eastern half of our campus, it's mainly buildings that are designed zootaxonomically. So you'll find the great apes in one particular area. You'll find the herpetarium, obviously, with the reptiles and amphibians. We have a birdhouse. We have a primate house. That's the way our zoo was designed back in the late 20s and the early 30s. These older historic buildings that you'll see as you go up the hill, they all share the same kind of architecture. It's a Spanish Mediterranean style architecture. At that time, when zoos were building these kinds of buildings, they're beautiful buildings, they were designed to hold a large diversity or number of animals. But there were a lot of small cubicles with 1 or 2 animals per enclosure. Our philosophy has changed greatly since then. In the last 30, 40 or more years, most zoos now have moved to a different type of design for their exhibits. We're designing larger exhibits that can hold normal social biological groups that are more conducive to breeding. So if you go into some of these older historic buildings, you'll see the same outside structure, but on the inside, all of those small cubicles have been removed. We put in fewer, larger, more naturalistic type displays, and that's been more conducive to some of the breeding programs that I'm talking about today. If you go to the west half of the zoo up in the river's edge, that's a different type of design. Those are what are called immersion type exhibits, where, and we're now mixing species. You might find carnivores with ungulates, not in the same enclosure, but they look like they're sharing the same area. So that's zoogeographic. And so we have the African section, we have the Asian section, we have the South American section. So you'll find the animals that are found in those particular areas. And then actually, as you walk up the path, you'll see all kinds of interpretives and prints in the pathway and a lot of vegetation. So you feel like you're moving to that animal's habitat, which is different than the old building style.
I can feel your passion.
Yeah. It's not just me. There are many people here at the zoo and many of our keepers, and very passionate, very committed. So.
Thank you so much for letting me see this free.
Thank you.
I feel
you for
so
coming
special.
to our zoo and letting us share some of this, what we do. So appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you.
This episode is brought to you in part by Hotels25.com. It's a website that helps you find the best prices on hotels and guest houses and hostels around the world in one simple search. Hotels25.com.
If you like this podcast, please subscribe in iTunes or the podcast app on your smartphone. You can see pictures, watch videos, and read much more on the radiovagabond.com. Palais can be reached for interviews and public speaking gigs on mail at theradiovagabond.com.
And then it's goodbye to St. Louis, and I start the first part of my big American road trip. My first stop will be Memphis, Tennessee, around 450 kilometers south, and I'm so looking forward to that. My name is Palais, and I gotta keep moving. See ya!